Indonesia is home to the world's largest Muslim population. Here, Islam is often described not only as a religion, but as Indonesian Islam, a term that suggests something distinct, localized, and national. But what does Indonesian Islam really mean? Can a universal faith be defined by national boundaries? Is Indonesian Islam a theological expression, a cultural adaptation, or a political and social project? And where does it stand in relation to what many describe as normative Islam?
Assalamu alaikum. I am Zainuddin Anda.
I'm Abolaji Abdurrahman Ismail.
I am Muhammad Khamis Ahmed. Today, together with my team, we will be leading a very critical discussion on the concept of Indonesian Islam.
Our university, the Indonesian International Islamic University, is designed as a space for global academic engagement. By bringing together lecturers and students from different cultural and national backgrounds, UIII creates an environment in which questions about Islam, identity, and context naturally arise. One such question concerns the concept of Indonesian Islam. At UIII, this idea is explored not only from within Indonesia, but also through the perspectives of non-Indonesian students and scholars. In the interviews that follow, participants share what stands out to them about Islam in Indonesia, drawing on their lived experiences and prior religious contexts. This project is part of an independent project course under the guidance of Dr. Bhirawa Anoraga and represents an academic exploration. The views expressed are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the official position of UIII.
Indonesia itself is a new invention. Yeah? The word itself is not a native word. It comes from the vocabularies and languages of the West, and the political geography of Southeast Asia is entirely the result of colonization, colonialism. All our political boundaries are colonial boundaries, like in Africa, right? In the way that Africa was divided between the European powers, Southeast Asia was also divided among the European powers. And I think at that point, something interesting happens. From the 19th century onwards, particularly in the case of Indonesia, the Dutch, who ruled Indonesia as a colony, began to view Islam in terms that were increasingly adversarial. Because remember, modern colonialism is driven by capital, driven by capitalism. And so modern colonial establishments wanted to dominate the local economies, but regarded Muslim merchants, especially Muslim merchant networks, as rivals to Western economic expansionism. And so from there, they emerged this concern that Islam and Muslims, not Islam the religion, but Muslims as individuals and collectives, Muslims might pose an economic challenge or a barrier to Western expansionism. And so we begin to see attempts to understand Muslims by Europeans, by Westerners. And this is where then, in time, they grew the increasingly hostile attitude towards political Islam in particular, because by the mid-19th century, Muslim communities all the way from Africa to Asia were already beginning to mobilize themselves against colonialism, because that was the political reality at the time. And so the fear was that contact between Muslims would generate both interests and activism among Muslims. So if Muslims from Asia met Muslims from South Asia, who met Muslims from the Horn of Africa or North Africa, the idea was that when Muslims meet, they conspire against Western colonialism. And so in the case of Dutch Indonesia, the Dutch East Indies, the Dutch were deeply concerned about how political Islam should be controlled to prevent resistance against Dutch colonial rule, right? And so then we begin to see a certain approach where the idea of Indonesian Islam was developed not only by Indonesians, but crucially by Western Orientalists.
It's a modern term that has never been in the pre-modern time. I mean, this idea of Indonesian or Egyptian or Moroccan qualifying Islam with a national identity, it's a totally modern thing. I don't think that's theological. It's a more political endeavor. We can speak of previously. I mean, we can speak of Islam in Indonesia or Indonesian Muslims or Egyptian Muslims, and how Muslims practice in Indonesia may be different from Muslims practice in other places. But trying to theorize that at the level of Islam, it's something totally new. And it's incomparable to any other thing. So people usually try to compare that with fiqh Ahl al-Kufa or fiqh al-Madina. That's totally different thing for different reasons. Because when people think of fiqh Ahl al-Kufa or fiqh Ahl al-Madina, these are something that's theorized, that it's people in the Kufa don't follow this specific concept because of the urf or the ʿādāt of the Kufa. That's not the argument. They are following this understanding of fiqh because this is the ijtihad of the ulama who were living in the Kufa. So it's not a geographical thing. And that's why we find people in Morocco following the Maliki madhab, which initiated in Medina, and people in Egypt following the Shafi'i madhab who grew up in Mecca and studied in Medina and Iraq. And so it was not that geographical thing. It was a matter of ijtihad. And that's why we find that the Shafi'i madhab, for example, one argument is that the Imam Shafi'i, it changed his madhab when he went to Egypt because of the circumstances of the. That's absolutely not true. And there are a couple of literature that clearly shows that the change of the Shafi'i madhab, Shafi'i al-Jadid, Jadid al-Madhab, is not due to the change of the geography. It's a new ijtihad. And that's why it's well known that Imam Shafi'i said, لا أجعل في حل من أفتى بمذهب القديم. So I don't allow people to follow my previous madhab. So if it's a matter of geography, why would he condemn his previous ijtihad? I mean,
constructed with a purpose, constructed with the idea that, Indonesian Islam is somehow different from Arab Islam, or different from South Asian Islam, or different from African Islam, which is not true, of course, because Islam is Islam, it's the same, right? But the idea that somehow Indonesians were less Muslims because they were culturally Indonesian. And this, for historians like myself, becomes deeply problematic. And a lot of my work has been focused on how to critically understand and respond to these 18th, 19th century, Orientalist biases, because I believe that in a sense there was almost an attempt to present Indonesian Islam as being non-political, as being more cultural, and being more Indonesian. More pacifist, but pacifist in the sense that it did not resist empire, right? Yeah, because remember, colonialism requires acquiescence, it requires collaboration. And so
there are differences between Muslim practices, Muslim, not Islamic practices, okay, Muslim practices in Indonesia and in North Sumatra and between Sumatra and between Java and between Egypt and Indonesia, and that's normal. Some of these practices are approved by Islam under the concept of ʿādah, urf, ikhtilaf, whatever concept. Some are not recognized, some are disapproved, some are not legalized. That's absolutely fine. But what we find in Indonesian Islam is a different layer. It's a theorization of this as a concept and identity, a political identity. That's something that's invented. It's not something that's normal. It's not due to the culture, it's not due to the differences. No, that's a political project, invented an identical thing.
My concern is when people talk about Indonesian Islam in recent times, over the last 20, 30, 40 years, it's a throwback to that Orientalist period. It's a throwback to that colonial period. And you can see this happening very clearly post 9/11. Post 9/11, and then you have, the so-called war on terror, which was unilaterally declared by the United States. And then all Muslim countries, all Muslim societies are given a simple choice. You're either with us or against us, yeah? And so this forces Muslim countries to, address demands from a hegemonic power. Now, during that time, I think in Indonesia, there were many people who said, okay, we are not the bad Muslims, we are not the terrorists, we are the good Muslims, we are the... And this is when the colonial idea of Indonesian Islam was brought back to life. Right? And so you look at our Islam and you see how tolerant and relaxed and accommodative we are and what have you. But that has always been the case even before 9/11. That was the case even before colonialism. So the use of the term, as a kind of selling point, this is a kind of merchandising of Islam. This is a kind of ideological, propagandic promotion of a certain brand of Islam to suit the needs and demands of Washington. Now,
that within Indonesia itself. So there are some differences between the ʿādāt on Minangkabau, for example, in Sumatra, and Bugis on Sulawesi. But this is disregarded at the theorization level. It's dismissed at theorization level. Although Islam considers these differences, okay? Because Islam doesn't consider the flexibility at the national level. No, they consider the flexibility at the locality level. So my village may be different in ʿādāt from the other village. But the Indonesian Islam concept doesn't consider that. Why? Because it's a political project. So it considers that the ʿādāt of Indonesia, Indonesian Islam, assuming that there is homogeneous identity, a homogeneous ʿādāt within Indonesia. Why? Because it's simply a national project. So it's excluding anything outside Indonesia and homogenizing everything inside Indonesia. And this is not how Islam works.
That, Indonesian Islam is not a simple thing. Like I said, you don't open a box, you take out some Indonesian Islam. It's not a pill you swallow, suddenly you practice Indonesian Islam. Because, as you correctly note, there are also other strains of Islam. There's Sufi Islam, there's Salafi Islam, there's all kinds, different expressions of Laskar Jihad is also part of the Indonesian landscape. Yep, it's part of the Front Pembela Islam is also part of Indonesian Islam. You cannot erase that, right? So I think, it all begins with being cautious about reductivism.
Upon my arrival to Indonesia, I was introduced to something unique called Wasatiyatul Islam. Indonesia have come to realize that Islam or Deen or any religion should not be forced onto people to accept, but it should be embraced by the body, the mind, and the soul. So when you make it modern, when you make it acceptable, when you make it easy for people to practice, I think it is far better than imposing it on them. So when you impose it on them, maybe his actions maybe his attitude, he might change his attitude, but deep down his soul and his heart does not accept it.
You see that in Indonesia, a lot of care is taken with the upkeep of mosques. Sometimes you pass through the poorest areas, and the mosques are the best buildings in the area. So even people who are very poor will ensure that the mosque is well taken care of. I suppose because it's the place you go to pray, so it's the closest you'll get to Allah. So I can see mosques are very important symbols here in Indonesia. I think they're more vibrant here than I've seen anywhere else in the world.
As compared to Islamic South Asia, if I focus on women, it's very tough, and women face very much difficulties in daily life, even the basic rights. But here, women are very free, even they are riding bike very freely or and working in every field. So it's a very unique thing about
We
Indonesian
talk
Islam.
about how Indonesian people, they can balancing between them social life and them religious. Actually, Indonesian, whatever is happening, they never left them brain, or they never stop them religious activities. Like you can find them, they are smoking, they are reading Quran, they go to bars or clubs. After that, they come back and pray also. So Indonesian, they are very perfect in this side, and that's making me interested about it.
They have very huge respect for Islamic leaders. They have like KIE or Islamic religious leader. They respect them a lot. They follow them a lot.
Indonesian Islam teaches us that Islam is not all about prayers, it's not all about ritual and spiritual acts. It also cares about environment, it cares about the nature, which many of the Muslim countries does not care about that much.